Hi, welcome back to Hamishzz Recaps. Today I will talk about the movie titled Shame. As usual, spoilers ahead. Before moving on, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe button for more content like this. Brandon Sullivan is a man in his 30s who is a successful account manager at a huge firm. Although his life is quite successful, the guy is pretty messed up. He is a sex addict. He often pays for prostitutes and constantly indulges in watching erotic content. Unable to manage his usual life and sex life, Brandon is constantly frustrated at himself. He has a sister named Sissy who calls him every day, but he never answers her call. The man seems to either be engaged in masturbation when he is alone or sleeping with some random woman, and it's safe to say he has a troubled life. One day, on his way to the office, he notices a woman on the train. Despite clearly seeing that the woman is married, he cannot stop himself and tries to seduce her. The woman is visibly uncomfortable with his advances, and when the train stops, she runs away to avoid him. But the man, determined to sleep with her, pursues her until he loses her tracks. At his office while he is attending a meeting, he notices his computer being taken away. He inquires about it to his boss, who informs him that it is out of service due to some virus. But the virus on his computer is not enough to hold him off his addiction. Even without his computer, Brandon finds a way in the office washroom to relieve himself from the frequent urges. One night, while he is busy watching some adult content on his laptop, he gets a call from his sister. As usual, he hangs it up and carries on, but this time she also calls him on the telephone, and yet again the call automatically hangs up and the call is sent to voicemail. Sissy informs her brother that she has cancer, and that she has only got a week to live. But the sexaholic brother does not react to the news. He seems unbothered by it and continues browsing through the adult content. Brandon is too involved in his addicted ways and continues to check out women out in the public, and even in his office he also eyes one of his female colleagues, Marianne, picturing her naked in his fantasy. One night, he visits a bar with his colleagues and his boss, David, to celebrate their success. After recently completing a deal that was made possible by Brandon himself, they decide to enjoy the evening. While celebrating, his boss sees some women in suits at the bar and walks up to the girls. David seems similar to Brandon and can't seem to stop himself from flirting with one of the women named Elizabeth. Brandon's addiction acts up as well, and he too comes up to his boss to aid the poor man or perhaps pick up the girl himself. Though his boss is sloppy and makes a fool out of himself in front of the ladies, the clever employee acts real sophisticated. While David continues to make poor advances, Elizabeth eyes Brandon, which the man is quite aware of. After the party is over, Brandon hails a taxi for his drunk boss and sends him off. Luckily for him, Elizabeth offers him a ride, which he happily accepts. They end up fornicating at the back of some random alley. The same night, when he returns home, he hears loud music playing from inside his room. He is suspicious of a break-in and quietly enters his room, picking up a baseball bat as he enters. However, he finds out that it was his sister who had come to his place. She is in the shower and Brandon walks in without regard. He asks her how she entered, and she casually explains that she had a spare key that he had given her. She had faked her whole cancer fiasco apparently. Sometime later, while Brandon is once again busy in his room, he overhears Sissy talking to someone on the phone. She keeps crying and pleading with the person on the phone to not leave her. The next morning, she asks her brother if she could live with him for a few days. At first, the man is reluctant, but she keeps insisting, and he agrees to let his sister crash at his place for the time being. At the station, Brandon and his sister wait for the train, and while they are at it, he asks if she needs any help with the money. Sissy assures him that she is doing fine in her musical career and has no issues with money, and even invites him to come to see her perform. He reluctantly agrees to her request. At the office, David approaches Brandon, asking him to hang out after office hours. Brandon takes this opportunity and takes the boss to his sister's gig with his boss at some fancy VIP restaurant. After Sissy's performance, she approaches her brother. The lustful boss, David, introduces himself and starts flirting with her, but the easygoing sister just rolls along with the conversation. The pair seem to instantly hit it off, and while returning, the couple start kissing passionately inside the cab, while the brother sits embarrassed on the other side. They both crash at Brandon's place. When he comes to his apartment a few moments after paying for the taxi, he finds out that his bedroom is occupied. As Brandon sits outside frustrated, the couple starts making out in his bedroom. Now fully anxious and frustrated at his private space being invaded, he dresses up in his trousers and goes outside for jogging. The next day, at the office, Brandon's computer has been repaired and brought back to his office. David once again calls Brandon to his office and informs the man that the computer just had lots of pornographic stuff stored in its hard drive, but he does not directly accuse his favorite employee. David thinks that Brandon's computer had been hacked by some sex-addicted freak. Later at the office, Marianne comes up to Brandon and asks him out. So that night, after a lot of consideration, he meets Marianne at some restaurant for dinner. At the diner, Brandon, who is used to only deriving pleasures from women in particular, without ever actually having to bond with them, finds it hard to have any form of normal conversation with Marion. His inexperience in relationships shows in the way he talks to her, and she quickly figures out that he has never been in a long relationship with anyone. Though it's a date, they don't seem to hit it off, and after a few hours of mundane conversations, he walks Marion to the station. Nothing intimate happens between the two, and they both part ways in an awkward way. Brandon then returns to his empty apartment. Later, when he is busy yanking in the bathroom, his sister walks in on him. Highly embarrassed, he yells at her and physically assaults her while he is at it. She keeps apologizing, but consumed by self-loathing, he refuses to hear her. Sissy also comes across her brother's laptop with its screen displaying explicit content, and disgusted at this, she finally decides to leave the place. David then realizes that he has gone too far with his addiction and is embarrassed and disgusted with himself. So he collects all of his porn magazines and DVDs and throws them away. He even ditches his laptop, now resolved to get rid of his addiction. Brandon starts spending his time with Marion to be committed to her. One day during his office hours, he drags her to a corner and kisses her passionately. They leave the office and arrive at a hotel in a cab. They book a room and start making out. But unfortunately, this does not seem to work out so well with the sexaholic. As they get more and more intimate, he fails to perform and gets upset instead. Thus, he asks Marianne to leave the place. Frustrated at this, the addict relapses into his old habits again and brings a prostitute to the place and pays her to engage in rough intercourse. In the evening, Brandon is in his apartment watching TV when his sister arrives once again. He confronts her about her relationship with his boss and expresses his sadness with her still being in contact with his boss and warns her not to see him again. He asks her to stop having any form of contact with David, warning her that the man has a family. This time, he asks her to leave his apartment and find somewhere else to stay. Sissy desperately requests him to let her stay once more, claiming that it's his duty as an older brother. But the man cold-heartedly tells her that she is only weighing him down. Desperate as she is, Sissy tries to convince her brother to be reasonable. But Brandon is firm in his decisions and does not want to hear anything else from his sister. Not wanting to argue any further, Brandon goes out and tells her to be gone by the time he returns. After their argument, Brandon goes out into the night seeking to relieve him of his urges. He ignores every call from his sister and her pleas to reaffirm that she is not a bad person. He enters some club where he tries to pick up a woman and ends up inappropriately touching the woman and makes lewd remarks to her. At this point, the man is desperately asking the woman to come to sleep with him. His advances became less suave and more desperate. He lacks any form of shame and decency. Even when the boyfriend of the lady shows up, Brandon, still a slave to his habit, continues making incredibly lurid statements about the woman. As expected, the woman's boyfriend ends up beating him to a pulp. Unsuccessful at his first attempt, he tries to enter another nightclub, hoping to fill his appetite for sensual pleasure. But his entry to the nightclub is denied despite his attempts. Outside, he sees a homosexual man on the corner of the street and follows that man to a gay hookup club. Inside, he enters some hallway behind the curtains. As soon as he gets inside, he is dragged by some stranger to a corner and the two start making out. Still not satisfied, Brandon roams wildly around the city, crashing at every place where the prospect of his satisfaction is guaranteed. All the while, he does not pick up any of his sister's phone calls, nor does he make any attempts to call her. Now he goes to a random apartment where he meets some random woman. He goes inside the apartment where he engages in a torrid threesome with two female strangers he meets. Clearly, the man has fallen off the rails. After he is done with his self-destructive endeavor, he finally checks the voicemail he got from Sissy. Then he tries to make a few calls to his sister, but she does not pick up his calls. Realizing this, he gets on a train to his home in a hungover state. When he gets off at his station, he makes his way to his apartment, still trying to call Sissy, but his sister not picking up his calls worries him. Fearing that something awful may have happened, he anxiously rushes to his apartment. When he enters the apartment, he sees his sister lying unconscious on the bathroom floor with bloodied hands. She seems to have slit her wrists. Brandon is mortified at the scene he finds his sister in. He immediately calls an ambulance and takes her to the hospital. This time, the incident with his sister seems to have made quite an impact on Brandon and shows true remorse and stays by his sister's bedside until she recovers. Sitting close to her, he notices other scars on her hands, which suggests that this was not just her first attempt. This makes him realize his negligence towards his kin. After she recovers, the brother is now finally relieved. He seems to have learned his lessons and feels truly guilty about his actions. Knowing that his habit almost cost him his sister's life, he cries. Now Brandon is trying to change his ways and bring his addiction under control despite his disastrous attempt to do so the first time. Once again on the train to his office, he comes across the same married woman whom he tried to seduce before. She instantly recognizes the man. This time, however, the roles are reversed and the attempts to flirt are first made by the woman. Brandon recognizes the woman too. He looks at her and stares at her ring. The train comes to a halt, but his inquiring look suggests many curious thoughts racing in his mind. Thank you for watching the video. What do you think about this movie? Tell us in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content. See you next time.